Hello and a warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining this Hardman Co Investor Forum. My name is Keith Hiscock and I'm the Chief Executive of Hardman Co. These forums give investors the chance to hear a company's investment case and then question the management. So Incanthera is committed to the development of novel treatments for solid tumours and licensing these to large pharmaceutical companies. It grew out of the University of Bradford Institute of Cancer Therapeutics. It operates from Manchester with research facilities in Bradford and Salford, and it's listed on the Aquis growth market with a market cap of 9 million. Pleased to be joined today by both the chairman, Tim McCarthy, and the CEO, Dr. Simon Ward. Gentlemen, over to you.
Keith, thank you for the introduction. Just to differentiate between the two of us, I'm Tim McCarthy, the chairman of the company, and I'm joined by Simon, our CEO. Well, it's a pleasure to come to the conference, the seminar this afternoon, evening, and to get started the evening. So we're going to introduce to you Incanthera, which, as Keith said, is listed on the Aquis growth market here in London. And we're going to take you through the genesis of the company, the portfolio, and then what our commercial plans are going forward. So the company is concentrated in the area of oncology or novel cancer medicines, and there's a general theme running through all of our development programs, which is what we call targeted technology. So in short, what we're aiming to do is to develop novel oncology medicines, which are very effective, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be developing them, but to direct them into the body in such a way that we minimize or eliminate all of the usual side effects that one usually experiences or patients experience when they're going through therapy for oncology. Keith very kindly gave us a little bit of an introduction here in terms of where we came from, but the company heritage is from the University of Bradford. And on the campus at Bradford, there is a specific unit called the Institute of Cancer Therapeutics. Now, this is not a particularly well-known facility, but it's a building which is a four-story building, housing about 50 researchers and support staff, professors, PhDs, postgraduates, all concentrating in the area of oncology research. We've got some very clever people there. And the way the company developed was just over 10 years ago, the university approached Simon to ask his assistants in advising them how they could start to commercialize the early stage research which they were developing. And cut a long story short, the solution for that was a typical spin-out company, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with in this area, in this industry. And so Simon formed the company, and the first product was brought in, and we purchased or licensed that technology, but in a way that we acquired it 100%. So we're not reliant on licenses which would run out. And the commercial terms of that were that we did an equity swap in order to acquire the rights to that first drug. And then the clever bit which Simon did at the time was to say to the university dons, look guys, I can start this company, bring the new product in, but I can't develop a company without a pipeline because we're in the risk business here and not all these drugs are going to work. So we entered into, as a company, what we call the pipeline agreement, which we've actually just recently renewed. So we've got about 8 years left on that, and it will renew again. And we get first look at everything that comes out of the institute in our area of oncology. So very important for a company like ours to have that continuing pipeline. And to date, we've taken 3 products in total under that deal, as well as acquiring assets from other sources as well. So when we come later on to the slide deck to the portfolio, you see that we've got a number of products under development in the pipeline. And that very first deal, very first piece of technology, which was the establishment of the company, we have already licensed that out. So our first commercial deal. And that actually, if you look at the strap line at the bottom of the page, acquire, prepare, commercialize, is a very good demonstration of what our business model is. And that is we acquire in one way or the other, either through the university connection or through our other connections in the industry. We acquire good technology, which we believe we can develop. So use the word prepare, but we only develop it as far as we need to. such that we can get it out to a licensee and start generating revenue for the company. So that's the basic business model of the company. We're not in a situation where we want to be raising tens of millions of pounds in investors' money to put into programs which are going to keep as long as we can, because there's always a trade-off between investment risk and how much value you add before you pass it on to typically larger pharmaceutical players. And just before we go to the next slide, you may be wondering where the name came from. And if you're ahead of me, if you look at Shield Therapeutics and you squash it up, then that's where the name Incanthera came from. This next slide, it's just a little bit more detail of what I just described about the business model, in terms of firstly identifying those technologies to bring them in. And I emphasize again that our business model is to own all those intellectual property rights. We don't want to be hanging out on a license deal where we've acquired technology. And then we do the absolute minimum we need to in terms of development and investment in that development before we look for commercial partners. So we're very much looking in the very near future, in the next 2 or 3 years, to build a model whereby the revenues are self-generating cash, that we are in a position where we don't need to come back to the capital market for monies. And so it's self-perpetuating. So as new opportunities come through, we have enough cash through the revenues to develop those and get them out to commercial partners. And we're looking to build at quite an early stage, a revenue generating model, which is producing profits and cash generation. And that, I think, is really important when investors are looking at the opportunity of Incanthera. This is the team. It won't surprise you that we are operating in the virtual model or the outsourcing business model, which is very common now for small companies in our industry. So what that means is that we have the core team, and the people and bios you see on this slide is everybody in the company. That's the lot of us. So myself and Simon, who've got slightly different backgrounds. Mine is very much a financial corporate background. Simon's is very much a scientific. So we complement each other very well. Alan is our independent non-exec, industry background with pharma. Then Pavel, who looks after the intellectual property. Laura, who's a part-time CFO, and Suzanne, who looks after all of our investor relations and is also the company secretary. So a really, really tight team. We work very well together. There's a lot of complementarity. And then whenever we do development, we put that out to specialist companies that will do manufacturing or development of one sort or testing. And we just pay for that as we go. So again, we're keeping the overheads extremely low, which again, I think is important from the investment perspective. And we're putting investors' money where it really counts, and that is to add value to the product development programs. So this is a snapshot of what we've done in the last 18 months or so. So I think when Keith introduced us and I started the slide presentation, I mentioned that we're now on the Aquis growth market in London. So that happened in February 20. And that was an interesting time for us, because I think, if I remember right, it was the 28th, 27th, 28th of February, right at the end of the month, literally days before the whole country went into lockdown. Mm-hmm. So we got in by the skin of our teeth. We've had actually a very good experience on Aquis. And if any of you aren't familiar with that particular market, I would encourage you to look at companies on it. Because I think the guys there are doing a fantastic job. And since we listed, we're up about 20% share price. You can see from the graph on the right, we had quite a good increase as we were putting regular news flow out, which is, I'll come back to detailed on the left. And then it's come up a little bit in the past 6 months or so. But as we look forward, and we'll come back to that later in the slideshow, we are looking forward to quite a lot of news flow coming up for the next 6 months or so, which I'm sure will drive that share price and value forward. But a quick snapshot on the left, and I know Simon's going to go a little bit more into this in terms of the technology, especially for our leading drug development, which is a product called STX.L. You'll see there's a number of references to STX.L on there, permeation study, sensitization study, new patent filings, etc. And this is a really, really exciting, quite very, very novel approach to the problem of melanoma, as most of you will know, or skin cancer, which Simon will explain in a lot more detail. And then we actually have raised more money since we've come to Aquis. So in March this year, early this year, we did a placing raise just over £1 million, which gave us another extension to our cash runway. We're actually very parsimonious. We don't spend a lot of money. If you go back to the business model, which I described to you earlier on, so that augurs very well for the future, I think. So at this point, that's a really quick canter through the introduction of the company. And I'm going to hand over to Simon to take you through some of the technical side.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, and thanks everybody for listening. I won't labour our pipeline, although I would love to spend hours talking my way through it. But I'll try and highlight the sort of key points and focus possibly much more on SOL, which is our lead program at the moment. As Tim mentioned, we're in oncology, clearly, and our take on oncology is to try and look for drugs that have some kind of targeting moiety. And the majority of the drugs in our portfolio are what we call prodrugs, or targeting prodrugs. Prodrugs is a bit of an old word in the industry and generally used to define a piece of chemistry that try to overcome such barriers as its inability to be soluble and all these sort of physicochemical characteristics. But you can also configure chemistry to act as a prodrug such that its activity, its inherent biological activity, is switched on in certain situations, but otherwise kept neutered. And for oncology, obviously that opens up a whole new avenue of taking a very dangerous, if you like, drug that will clearly kill a cancer, but will also possibly have lots of iatrogenic effects in killing all of the other good cells. But keep it neutered, keep the safety catch on that gun until it actually sees the cancer, and then lift that safety catch. And that was the approach we took. And so the programs here that are on the slide, EP0015, Equin, GOC, all take that approach, but they use different signals to actually switch on the chemistry. And obviously they use different chemistry to effect the treatment of the cancer. And as Tim said, EP0015 is already out licensed to a third party. So we were very happy about that. But recently, we've become very interested in skin cancer, and SOL is our lead program in skin cancer. And it's a huge opportunity for us because the challenge of skin cancer is huge. We all know this. You know, we live in a world where we are almost bombarded every day by everything about the sun and what UV irradiation can do to our skin, from just drying it up, from actually helping sometimes in cases such as eczema and psoriasis. But clearly the whole skin cancer thing coming from UV irradiation as an exposure is very high on the list. And actually very recently, I don't know if anyone of you read some of the tabloids, there was an article that came out that said 75% of all Australians will be diagnosed with some form of skin cancer in their lifetime. Whether that holds up true, I think it just epitomizes the type of thinking that we have nowadays. And you walk into your local pharmacist or WH Smith or whatever it is, or you're in the airport and you're absolutely bombarded by a million different creams for sun care, be it sun tanning or for big SPF factor bottles and all these things. It's very much in your face, and there is a reason for that. This graph on the right here really sort of shows you this, that the skin cancer rates are just going up and up and up, and quite scarily so. It's gone up 45% in the last 10 years, fifth most common cancer in young adults. And that's important. It's young adults we're talking about here. In the dermatology world, we used to think about skin cancers as being really a problem of old age because it's a dosage thing. You expose your skin to the sun, and the more you expose it, the more likely you are to have a skin cancer. So the older you get, the more exposure you've had, and bingo, your chances go up. But actually, when you look at the demography at the moment, it's shifting backwards. It's coming more into that 25 to 50 sort of year-old bracket. In the UK, it's increased 70% in that bracket. It's really scary. So it kind of comes back to that young affluent person who can then travel, who can strip off and run around in lovely hot sun and enjoy his holiday, but also expose himself to UV irradiation that otherwise he would never have seen. And it is dangerous. And clearly we're seeing the effects of that in the statistics. For a small company like us, though, working in this particular field, sun care, let's move away from the oncology side, think about sun care. It's a massive industry. We're talking about a 13, 14 billion pound industry by 2024, where the numbers are silly, they're huge numbers for smaller companies. And so it's quite exciting for a small company to have a look at this particular area. What we know about our skin, of course, is quite a lot. And in terms of the sun and the UV irradiation, it boils down to two things. Obviously, cancers start and end with DNA damage and things that go wrong at the sort of the genetic level. And we have all sorts of mechanisms to try and prevent that happening in our skin. And we have an innate immunity to these things, innate immunity to mutations that will go on and cause cancer. And it's these two sort of elements that we really need to concentrate on to provide some kind of preventative, if not cure, but at least preventative towards the UV irradiation that we're under attack from all the time. Now, actually, as it happens, we do know one particular molecule, and forgive me for not actually mentioning it outright. We have a patent that will be coming public towards the end of the year, so then I can take all the gloves off and talk openly about it. But there is a molecule out there that we know will help both of these particular biological functions and actually fortify the skin against these problems, and actually start to treat the first insult that we see when we get UV irradiation, which is a change in the skin that we label actinic or solar keratosis. You'll hear it by both words. But for those of you who had it, you know the problems with these things. It's a nasty change in the skin. It's a reddened skin. It sort of blisters. It's obviously very painful. Treatment's not nice, and further exposure to UV irradiation is painful, but also leads to a change in those cells that can turn into a cancer itself. So these are things that we have to be aware of and things that we really want to try and stop. And going back to what I started the sentence with, we have a molecule here that we know and has been proven actually in phase 3 trials can cause a reversion of the changes brought about by UV irradiation, particularly for actinic keratosis, and also acts as a suppressant, or if you like, a preventative towards the onset of skin cancers. So I guess the big question is, well, why the heck aren't we using it all the time? And it would be lovely if we could, but the problem with it is that the proof of the pudding has always been in oral administration of this particular compound. And to get enough levels into the body to make this effect and to have this preventative function, you actually have to eat barrel loads of the stuff. And in fact, those clinical trials lasted over a year, and you were taking quite a lot of it. So it's just not something that we can just factor into our daily lives and make that change. However, when we start thinking about that in terms of dermatology is not really about taking pills and parenteral sort of administration of drugs, although those do exist for some diseases, of course. It really likes to have creams and ointments and unctions that you actually wipe on your skin. Your skin is accessible, it's there. So let's put something directly on the insult in the first place. So the challenge has always been here, well, can we take this particular molecule that has all of these great potentials and turning it into a cream so we can actually stick it on the place where it really needed to happen. And it's been a bit of a holy grail in the dermatology world. That's what we've been trying to do for a long time, but the actual sheer chemical process of managing to get it to the right place in the right form and shape at the right dosage to do its job has been really difficult just because of the chemistry of the molecule. I've had the great fortune of working with some really talented skin formulation scientists over in the past when I worked in a dermatology company. And one of those got on the phone to me about a couple of years ago and said, I think I've solved this particular problem. Now you're in oncology, Simon, you might be interested. And of course, we all said, yes, hurrah, let's have a look. And so he's actually managed to devise a formulation that will chaperone this molecule through the skin to the right place where it's needed, in the right form and in the right concentration to do the job, which is to treat actinic keratosis and potentially stave off the conversion of those cells into cancers, which would be very, very exciting. And so last year it was all about, well, okay, this is a great idea. Does it actually work? We've got a couple of things to prove here. Firstly, we've got to prove that it actually does the job and take the molecule across to the right part of the skin in the right concentrations. And we did this in the School of Pharmacy, actually in London, where there is a group there that really specializes on skin permeation studies. And we managed at all concentrations of our particular cream to take this molecule to the right place in the right concentration, or well above, so exceeding the concentration that was in line with that we saw in the oral phase 3 clinical trial. This is, in pharmaceutical terms, called a bioequivalence test, where you take the results of one administration, in this case oral, compare it with a new administration, and in our case, obviously topical, and if you get the same amount of compound pharmacokinetically reaching the target, hey, bingo, you've got bioequivalence. And in all of our tests, we exceeded that. So we were very excited by that, clearly. And the second question is, well, that's great, but is it safe? You're going to stick something on skin. If this actually holds up, it's going to be going slapped all over all the time. It could be a fantastic product. It could be turned into a sun cream, all sorts of opportunities. We have to know absolutely that it's safe. So unfortunately, we had to do this during COVID, and doing safety trials during COVID was obviously very difficult, but we managed to find a company that ran ex vivo skin irritation and sensitivity tests that have been accepted by the regulatory bodies. And they ran our formulation against their panel. And actually, it came out to be comparable to baby sun protection products that are already out there, which in a nutshell means this is about as safe as you're ever going to get. It's almost like putting water on your skin. It really is a safe compound. So we were surprised, very excited, clearly, and very grateful that we now have something that absolutely works. It's succeeded by equivalence test, which is a big marker. It's the safest houses. Great. Let's move it on and commercialize it. So I think at this point, Tim, I'll let you take over again.
Yes, thank you, Simon. It's always interesting, I think, when you explain the background to our lead product, Sol, because I found myself getting more excited about it. Even just I've listened to it about 100 times. Obviously, I know it inside out. But so just a couple of slides to finish off. I've got a summary slide after this, but what is everybody looking to the company to do now? Where is the investment profile? Where is the investment excitement? It's very much around Sol and what we're doing with it. So our activity around Sol and the commercialization is split into two ways. One is to go down what we call the cosmetic route, and the other is the straightforward pharmaceutical route, which, if you remember, Martin was describing earlier how one goes through clinical development for a pharmaceutical. They're both two distinct markets, both very valuable to us if we get Sol through both. But we're concentrating at the moment on the cosmetic side, which is exactly what Simon describing about how one uses it on the skin and to prevent and treat this condition. And so at the moment, we are talking to two major cosmetic companies, global cosmetic companies. We're not in a position to let you know who that is, but I think everyone on this seminar tonight would recognize both names. So I hope that's encouraging for you. Those discussions are going very well, and it's our intention to try and enter into a commercialization deal with at least one of those over the next few months. We've given guidance that we're expected to do something by the end of this calendar year. So that goes back to the business model. If you all remember when I introduced the business model earlier on, that we're looking to commercialize our products as quickly as possible, start generating revenue, and starting to get that back into the company to make us self-sufficient. And Sol, we believe, will be the first product out of the bag which will do that for us. But of course, we've got the pipeline coming on behind. So really exciting. And I have to say the uniqueness of the technology of Sol is really sparking up interest in these big companies. It really is. Just the last summary slide, just to remind you. So yes, I've just described the commercialization discussions which we're having, which are going extremely well. I'll remind you about the business model, which is very specific, and we deliberately put the business model together as we have. And just remind you, it's to minimize investment in the portfolio, bring it through as quickly as possible, and start generating revenues to make ourselves self-sufficient. That is supported by a portfolio which is diverse, so we're spreading the risk clearly, and all those products are at different stages of development. But it's all in the oncology area, and obviously Sol bridges from oncology to dermatology as well. In terms of our corporate profile, we listed about 18 months ago on the Aquis growth market, and as and when it's relevant, we are EIS VCT qualified. So that's the end of our presentation. Hopefully we haven't overrun too much. So I guess I'm going to hand back to Martin, is it, for Q&A? Have I got that right?
The first one's quite a toughie, Tim. It's, I think it was from Hanif, who has asked the question, do you have a plan B ready in case the licensing deal for Sol takes longer to materialise than you had hoped?
I don't know why you say it's a tough one. It's a fairly good one, actually. So well done, Hanif. Yes, in our business, actually, to be fair, in most businesses, one has to be aware of risks and what ifs and if things don't pan out. And the whole world has just experienced that over the last 18 months or so with COVID, clearly. In terms of ourselves, I'm guessing that the question is directed towards maybe our sustainability, maybe our cash runway, when talking about Plan B. That and/or, if there's a delay in the commercialization, is there an alternative? I'm guessing here what's behind the question. But firstly, on the financial side, we're pretty well sorted on that. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we did a fundraising early this year, so that gave us extra funds to see us through. And remind the audience once again that we're very parsimonious. We don't have large overheads. So obviously, we're trying to get the commercialization of SOL done as quickly as possible. We've given guidance that we'll do something before the end of this year. But in the instance that it takes longer, which is behind the question, then existing shareholders and investors shouldn't be concerned that we're going to run out of money, because I think I'm guessing that's what's behind the question. But although we've got ongoing discussions with 2 global companies, there are actually coming in from the sidelines other companies that are still expressing interest. So it's not as if everything's on black and blue with 2 companies, if I can use that analogy. So I think we're pretty comfortable. We're feeling okay, if that's a complete answer to Hanif's question.
Thank you, Tim. The second one I recall was from Julie C. She is asking, whilst it's not in your control, is there an update? Can you provide an update on how Ellipsis Pharma is progressing? Is it EP0015?
Sorry, do you want me to take that again, or do you want to?
Either, it doesn't matter. Yeah, obviously, it's not in our control, as you said, but they're doing pretty well with it, without divulging anything that clearly I can't, because we're on a confidentiality with them too. I think we're very prepared to say that it will be hitting human trials very shortly, and their development has been good so far. So touch wood, we've got something coming into the market that should be really groundbreaking, actually. Apart from that, I think we have to wait and hear from them directly.
Could you advise the percentage stock holding the company directors hold, and the total PLC, and the total PLC costs for the year?
Oh, crikey.
I can probably help.
I believe if my memory serves me right, that the directors have around 10%. I should know this, shouldn't I? But it's a good proportion. We have invested. Sorry,
10.5, Tim.
There you are. It's on your note, I think, isn't it? So I wasn't far off. And I think that demonstrates the belief we have in the company, because before we came to market, when we were a private company, we were investing our own money alongside private investors, and we all invested on the float itself, and we've invested more money since, either and also buying shares in the marketplace, as well as in new issues. So I think that 10% demonstrates our belief in the company, and there's nothing better to do that by putting your hand in your pocket and have the skin in the game. And the second part of the question, just remind me, Martin, sorry.
It was about your total PLC cost, but Tim, I've got that in front of me. So in answer to that question, on our note, basically the company has 2 costs. One is the general corporate overhead, and the other is the R&D spend, and they're split out on the front page. So it's about £600,000 is the answer to that question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Martin. It's useful you had those numbers to hand. But again, I just want to emphasize, if you look at any listed company, there are costs which you just cannot get away from being a listed company. Costs of the listing and advisors and everything which one has, and the fact that our costs in that category, all PLC costs or overhead costs, corporate costs coming as low as 600,000, I think does amplify or exemplify, I should say, the business model which I was describing earlier. That it's absolutely our determination to keep that overhead burden as low as possible for shareholders.
We've got a question from Kai, who has asked, do you have any thoughts on moving from the illiquid, difficult to trade Aquis market to the AIM market, which would gain greater awareness?
I've lost count of the number of times we've been asked this question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I alluded to it earlier, and I'm a great supporter of Aquis, actually, and I think it's developing almost on a monthly basis. And if you look at what they've done in terms of investment and how they're developing the market making, they're splitting the market into two different sectors. They've done a lot of innovative things, including using IT to the largest extent they can to facilitate trading. And like any developing market, if you go back 30 years or whatever it was when AIM first started, it was exactly the same. Absolutely the same. And Martin, you and I have known each other a long time. You'll know this. I brought one of the first biotech companies to AIM within 12 months of it starting, and I had the same questions then as I was CFO of that company. Well, why are you on this AIM market? It's illiquid, and half of the institutional investors in the city wouldn't look at AIM companies at that time, but that's all changed. I do believe it's going to be the same with Aquis. So we're going to persist. And in fact, I don't believe it's as illiquid as people perceive it to be. I mean, we've had some pretty good volumes go through our book, in the 18 months or so since we've been on the market. And I haven't certainly heard any of our shareholders saying they've had difficulty in trading when they want to. So I think there's a perception issue here as well as a practical issue.
What comfort can you give private investors that if you need to raise further capital, you will give PIs or private investors the ability to participate?
Interesting. Sorry, I seem to be hogging these questions or answers, Simon. I'm sorry.
It's fine. No, you're doing great. I'm enjoying
it. I don't know if this is prompted by the rise of a primary bid, for example, which I have a lot of time for those guys. I think they've done a fantastic job in opening up new issues, especially on AIM, the main market, to private investors. Now, if we were at some point to raise more cash, then we would certainly look at that. I don't see any reason why we can't. And we know the guys there very well. So the short answer to the question is, because I'm sure you want to crack on with the next investing company, is that we will certainly do our best if we go out and raise new money in the future to give an opportunity for private investors to invest. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Matt, I thank you both very much. Very interesting presentation and well presented.